This is Andy Tube. In this video, I'm going to show you how to check and set the thread clearance between the heel of the bobbin case and the bobbin case cushioning spring on a Singer Model 327K. Now this process will cover a couple, 3 dozen Singer machines, and probably other brands too, because the principle is going to be the same. Parts may look a little different or be in a little different position, but what thread clearance is talking about is needle thread clearance between the bobbin case and that cushion spring. And at first you're thinking needle thread. You know, the needle is way up here. What are you talking needle thread down here? But that's how the machine forms a lock stitch, is the hook grabs the needle thread and brings it around over the bobbin case, and the hook casts off that thread, and it has to go between that space to continue wrapping around the bobbin thread and making a lock stitch. So the needle thread does come way down here. Okay, so this stitch, I'm doing it just by hand. This stitch is in the process of being formed. That pink thread, the hook has grabbed it here, and it's just about ready to cast it off. But you see it has crossed over the blue bobbin thread. So it's got the first wrap, or halfway around the bobbin thread. So it needs to continue the needle thread around here, up through there, and back towards the needle to finish the lock stitch. So here it's going to cast off there. And here is the needle thread going through the thread gap and continuing on and up. So now it's got a lock stitch. Now the problem with this particular machine, let me grab that needle thread again and bring it around, is it hangs up right here. It's caught. It hangs for a second. I have to kind of give it a tug with my fingers to pull it on through. So right away I see that the space between here is lacking. This is adjusted too close, way too tight. And what happens is the machine is going and going. The hook grabs the thread, drops it off, goes right back up to grab the thread again and drop it off. And if this gets, the first thread's hung up, the second one can just get stuck, and pretty soon they're all getting stuck. And you have a big tangle here, sometimes called nesting. So I need to increase the space between the two. Now why is this cushioning spring here? And it's because as that thread, needle thread, comes really slamming over the bobbin case and through this area, it kind of pushes the bobbin case this way. And after the thread casts off, the spring kind of pushes it back to the left. So what you hear when you're sewing isn't really like the needle and stuff. You hear this tick, 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 tick. It's this bobbin case kind of rocking back and forth between the hook and the little cushioning spring. So first, how much space should you have? On this model, the Singer said the space between these two should be 0.016 to 0.020 inches. someplace in that range. So I have my small feeler gauge here, and I have all of those blades 0, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0, 0 out. So according to them, it's got to be adjusted someplace in this range. And as a footnote, they say more so towards the 0, 1, 6 to have the machine run quieter. And that kind of makes sense, because the bigger the gap, the more that bobbin case is going to travel. And the more it travels, the little bit faster it goes, so when it slams in back and forth, that tick, tick, tick becomes tuck, 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 louder and louder. So especially on vintage machines, they're a little bit, you know, noisy to begin with because of all the steel mechanical stuff. So if you have a big gap here, that bobbin case is really going to be boom, 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 jumping back and forth, and it's going to be noisy. So you put it a smaller space. But this one is like way too small. So that's the purpose of the spring, and that's the spacing of the gap. So how do you do it? So we've got to loosen these two screws that are holding this bracket and keeping everything in place. Okay, and I kind of think of it as the top screw, kind of like a swivel, and the bottom screw kind of adjustment. Because when you want to take the bobbin case out, you lift that bracket up over the big screw and you swing it to the right. See, and that moves the bracket and the spring so that you could take out this bobbin case if you wanted to clean and so forth. And then when you're finished, you swing it back over to the bobbin case and get it around that screw. So those two screws, to make this adjustment, you have to loosen. Okay, I'm going to take my little mini ratchet here and get in there, because it's kind of a tight fit under here. See if I can get this lined up a little. There. Get this other one loose here. Oop, not quite in the groove there. There we go. Okay, now that they're loose, I'll get this in here and there. So maybe hopefully you can see that now that's loose in here. Now even the allowable adjustment here isn't very much. You know, it's a small distance between, say, 0.015 and 0.021, you know, inches. That's a very small amount. So that's why we use a feeler gauge. And I think what I usually try and do is go to the narrower space, because I would prefer to have less noise. So usually my first adjustment, I adjust towards the smaller space and try it. And if the thread hangs or something in here, then I'll go back and start increasing the space. Okay, and let's see if I can get this There, I'm rotating the hand wheel towards me because I like this little groove right here in the hook to be right in front of the gap. So the hook point, this is on its retreat back up, the hook point, the hook oscillating back up, there's the hook point. And I'm going to stick my 0.016 down in there, and yeah, it's real loose. Look, see, I'm way over 0.16 because the little blade is kind of rocking back and forth now. See if I can get that kind of tucked down in there. Then I'm going to push this positioning bracket with the spring over against my blade. Okay. Kind of like right there. Whoop. Yeah. It's hard to do this with the camera because I don't want to block your view any more than necessary. So I was hoping I could set this blade up and keep it there. Now I'm not jamming it over there because I don't want to bend the spring while I'm adjusting it, because as soon as I take the blade out, the spring would move and I wouldn't have my 0.016. So I'm just going to try right now tightening this front adjustment screw to see if I can get a little tightness on there to hold that bracket in place a little bit. This screw is a little easier to work on than the one back here. Now that I've kind of got that holding, I just want to just test my, see, and I have it a little too tight because when I put the blade in, I'm seeing the spring flex back. That means the blade's pushing it to the right. So I was trying to avoid that. Let's try it again here. Let me loosen this and see if I can just be more, maybe more gentle. What if I turned it over this way? Would that make any difference as how the blade sat in there? So you just kind of want them touching. You know, when you do a feeler gauge, you just want the metal on both sides to just gently be rubbing on the blade of the feeler gauge. So, okay. So I'm being a little more careful this time about how hard I'm pushing on that bracket. Now let's try it. Okay, good. This time I could see right away as I push the blade in and out, the spring isn't flexing. So I'm pretty comfortable that I have it right about 0.016. Now my retired singer guy up in Canada, he told me that he would like use the 0.017 blade because he always felt he flexed the spring a little bit. So if he used the 0.017 and tightened it and then tested it with the 0.016, it would be perfect. So that's what he would do. But let's go in now and kind of tighten. See if I can tighten up this top screw here and get them both pretty snug. I don't want them to move while I'm testing it, right? And then if I like it, what I've got, then I'll tighten them up more firm. But let's see if this goes around and cast off the thread now without it getting hung up here in the clearance. So here we go. There's my needle thread. Oh, look, see how it's going right through there now? Good. So it's just slipping right through, and that's the minimum. So you can see, I don't know, can I make that rock a little bit? See, there's a, does that sound familiar? But it's a minimum amount, and the thread is going through there. I'll test it one last time, but the thread is slipping right through, so I think that's going to be good. Later, when I do the sewing test and some final adjustments on the machine, if that hung up, you know, because I would, if it would hang up, then I'll go back in and loosen these, and I'd try 0.017, you know, until I had where the thread could go through easily. What I want is the narrowest space for the thread to go through and clear easily, and I want the narrowest space so the bobbin case doesn't snap back and forth as much, and so it will sew quieter. So now that I've got it where I want, I would just go in and snug those up good and be finished. So that's how to check and set the thread clearance on a 327K. And you know, every machine, the hook's going to wrap the thread around the bobbin case to pick up the bobbin thread, and then the thread has to get back up to the needle. The slack in the thread has to go back up to the needle. See? Boom. So your machine may have a different looking bobbin case. It may have a different bracket and cushion spring and stuff, but the principle is all the same. And usually there has to be some way to adjust this gap. This machine was a 0.016 to 0.020. Like some of the Rocketeers, I think they were 0.012 to 0.016. So, you know, they're a little different depending on the model, but I have set clearance, you know, at somebody's house when I didn't have a feeler gauge, just by moving it and looking at the gap a little bit and say, oh, let's try that. You know, now the thread's going through, but it's still noisy. Let me make it a little closer. It's easier with a feeler gauge, you know, but I've done it even without a feeler gauge. So if you're on a model and you don't know what the gap is supposed to be, and if you do have a feeler gauge, just pick something, you know, pick like 0.015 and try it. And if it seems like too small a gap, go bigger. If it seems too big a gap and it's noisy, go lower. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope that was interesting to you, and that you will come back and see me. I got a lot of videos on my channel for you to see. Comments welcome. You can subscribe if you like to get notified of new videos. Take care of yourself.